Hello, welcome to this edition of the umgoblue.com podcast. This is Phil Callahan along with,
Clint Derringer.
and we're here to talk about the NCAA dropping the little tiny hammer on Michigan. Well, Clint, what do you think about this one?
In terms of what Buckeye fans and Spartan fans were hoping for with past results from the previous seasons, especially 21 through 23, it went over like like a soft breeze. It was nothing in terms of on-field success, but I wouldn't say that it was nothing in terms of the program. I think that there are some things that are impactful. I think that there was some interesting stuff to at least discuss. But as we've been saying for years now, literally years now, that the NCAA was never going to be able to really take away what Michigan accomplished, especially in the national championship season. The Big Ten in the season, by suspending Harbaugh and creating as big a distraction as they could for the final 3 regular season games and then into the playoffs, the Big Ten punishment was really the greatest opportunity for the people who dislike Michigan to see satisfaction. And the Wolverines were able to overcome that and still, win some tight games and then, obviously play their best in the biggest moments and win the national title. So in that perspective, in that, context, this was kind of a side for Michigan fans, and we'll take some enjoyment in the disappointment of our rival fan bases.
So, of course, Jim is saying nothing about it now, but he said quite a bit about it back then.
These are my views, my opinions, as I've seen college football, college sports take shape since my days as a student athlete and now as a current coach. I want to take this opportunity to speak about the big picture. Much bigger than any one game, bigger than any game this season, the issues I see affecting college athletics, college football, and more specifically, the student athletes, the talent. The big one, the one I first started mentioning back in 2020, and then again in 2022 at the Big Ten Media Days. I continue to advocate for that today, a system of revenue sharing with the student athletes. Now, I'm aware and understand that when someone speaks out in defense of those without a voice, attempts are made to diminish the individual's character and credibility. As a former player and current coach, mentoring many of these student athletes, what I wanted to do is be a voice for the student athletes. I want them to be treated with the respect and the dignity that they deserve. What I don't understand is how the NCAA, television networks, conferences, universities, and coaches can continue to pull in millions, and in some cases, billions of dollars in revenue off the efforts of college student athletes across the country without providing enough opportunity to share in the ever-increasing revenues. When student athletes call it a game, the corporate types call it a business. When the student athletes call it a business, the corporate types call it a game. I am aware that Notre Dame athletic director Jack Swarbrick said, and I quote, "I think the decision-making lost its way in terms of the focus on the student athlete and what's primarily best for them. But we are where we are. We have to try to make it work." And we do. We have to try to make it work. We have to try to make it better. And right now, the current status quo is unacceptable and won't survive. In my opinion, when we capitalize on the talent, we should pay the talent for their contributions to the bottom line. The game of football has evolved since inception and dramatically started to change in the 1970s, where at that time, one game a week was televised. Today, every game during the 12-week regular season is broadcast. In the major conferences, every game is nationally televised to millions of households and sold out stadiums every Saturday. Why wouldn't we let the student athletes share in the success of their sport? And we all should be about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm calling for a system that is fair, equitable, and benefits all involved. Don't exclude the student athletes from the profits. In my opinion, you can't say you're about diversity, equity, and inclusion if you aren't willing to include the student athletes in revenue sharing. And it's just short-sighted view of history to presume a system of revenue sharing would topple the current structure. Look at some of the companies who have implemented revenue sharing. Amazon, UPS, US Steel, to name a few. I was watching that movie Air. Dolores Jordan wouldn't let her son, Michael Jordan, sign an endorsement deal without Nike sharing in the revenue. And I think we can all agree that it worked out pretty well for Nike. As an NFL player, I was part of the change in NFL free agency rules and profit sharing with the talent. I lived it. I benefited from it. So did thousands and thousands of players that followed. I think we can all agree that the organizations and the NFL as a league and corporate entity have benefited greatly as well. I'm not saying that I have all the answers. What I'm hoping to accomplish today is sparking constructive conversation and timely action with and between the NCAA, conferences, coaches, universities, certainly a group representing the student athletes, as well as experts and legal minds who specialize in revenue sharing.
And Clint, I think that's the thing that a lot of people who don't closely follow Jim Harbaugh and Michigan football are really missing in this, okay? There's a lot of folks who say, well, Michigan bent the rules, broke the rules, twisted the rules. And, I've always said, hey, listen, this is the difference between, speeding on the expressway, right? Were you going 5 over or were you going 100 over, right? And Ohio State fans and Michigan State fans want to believe for various reasons, and folks in some of the big media want to believe that Michigan was going 100 miles an hour over, and really they weren't, okay? And again, it's all your perspective, right? But the thing is, when you look at this overall, Jim has been a critic of the NCAA for a very long time. And he has had no problems calling them out. And, it's one of those things, right? I always say when you jump up in the crosshairs, don't be surprised if somebody pulls the trigger. And Jim has had no problem calling out the NCAA for hypocrisy. And I think this was, their chance to take a shot back at him. So when people hear that statement that he said and assume that, oh, he's just trying to distract from the matter at hand. No, the matter at hand is how the athletes have been treated for a long time, right? And if this latest NCAA thing speaks anything to me, it's how the NCAA is walking dead, right? That for many of us who follow this, we think it's a mountain being made out of a molehill. And for the Ohio State and Michigan State fans, they're pissed at the NCAA because they couldn't do more, right? But we all agree that the NCAA kind of, can't do anything here, right? And it's funny to read and go through the findings and just kind of laugh at how powerless they are and how they're kind of having a tantrum, right? So going section by section here, um, the off-campus in-person scouting scheme. Well, Clint, what do you think about that? What do you think about Michigan? What they did on that, and how bad of a heinous offense it was?
Well, the whole core of the issue really is in this section, right? This is the Connor Stallions section. This is what was the most salacious from a PR standpoint in 2023, as it kind of was timed to drip, drip, drip out into the national media every week. It seemed like, in order to maximize the impact and distraction for the program. Um, and I think you know the same thing now as I thought then. I think it was really stupid for Connor Stallions to do what he was doing, uh, and put you know that season and those players and the program at risk, um, for what was any type of advantage above what other schools were doing. There's no way that the reward was worth the amount of risk. So to me, it all was very stupid, and how it was spun into Connor Stallions creating a lopsided competitive advantage for Michigan was also stupid, because as he has actually, since the scandal and since he left the scene, after the 2023 season is wrapped up, and Connor Stallions was able to kind of get into the media and tell his own story from his perspective. He's done a good job of explaining the difference between, um, the sign stealing part of it, the in-game uh, gamesmanship of trying to decode what the other team is trying to do, and the cat and mouse game between who is able to signal in their call last, right? Who has the advantage of making the last chess move, so to speak. So I think the cat and mouse part of it, I enjoy. I like listening and reading about kind of the stuff that's going on sideline to sideline, and from coach's box to coach's box. But in this context, with the committee on infractions, and actually costing Michigan, tens of millions of dollars in the long run, the um, the reward was not worth the risk of the advanced scouting and the videotaping of signals. Um, and to your point about the fecklessness of the NCAA, while I think it was stupid what Connor Stallions was doing, um, their rules are so unclear about why exactly this is against the rules. Again, it's a rule in the NCAA bylaws that was written to try to minimize cost for some programs who couldn't afford to send coaches to scout advanced games. So um, it was never intended to be an anti-cheating type of a rule. It was, a convenient rule to catch Michigan on what they were doing, as they were trying to find, um, you know, ever more efficient ways of winning at this cat and mouse game that all of the major programs are implemented, or are implementing in some way or another. So the whole thing is stupid. I still maintain a level of frustration with Connor Stallions in terms of getting out in front of his skis and putting one of the greatest Michigan seasons of all time at risk. But there's a lot of truth on his side of the argument also. And in the grand scheme of things, it all comes back to the NCAA um, trying to thump their chest and make as big a case as they can against Harbaugh and against Michigan by leveraging this stupid scheme by one particular staffer, Connor Stallions.
Completely agreed. And, it's interesting to me that one of the things that Connor has talked about is that there's a network of people doing this, right? That he would exchange films with. And, we don't hear anything about the NCAA going after that, right? If this is such a horrible thing that was going on, boy, where's the scandal, right? How widespread? Why aren't they going after it? And what strikes me in this is where I really feel that the media has fallen down and kind of shown kind of how irrelevant they are, right? Is that when you look to the media, you look for context, right? And even in the very name, sign stealing, right? How can you steal something that everybody in the stadium can see, right? And even when, in this NCAA ruling, nowhere does it say stealing. It says in-person scouting scheme. Okay, that's exactly what it is. But, cheating sells, stealing sells, right? There's no context on, hey, a lot of programs do something like this. And yes, Connor went to an extreme. And I completely agree with you that, the sizzle in the steak is how extreme he was, right? How he took it to really an unbelievable level in doing this. But, it's funny because when you read through this announcement from the NCAA, there's definitely some sizzle here too, right? They love to talk about how the network of individuals was referred to as the KGB, right? And Stallions referred to it as dirty film. And he spent a whopping $35,000 on tickets. Now, Clint, you and I know how much money is involved in college football these days, okay? The idea that $35,000 could somehow flip the scales on the top 20 or 30 programs is absolutely hilarious, right? But it just, and then so the NCAA was all about allegedly finding fact, right? And yet the panel noted that the true scope and scale of the scheme, including the competitive advantage it conferred, will never be known due to the individual's intentional destruction and withholding of materials and information. It's just it's so there's so much drama in this, right? Mm-hmm. And it's when you don't have facts, you bring drama, and there's just a whole bunch of sizzle here and not a lot of steak, right? So you're looking through this announcement, and it's like, okay, off-campus in-person scouting scheme, great. The next one, failure to cooperate, right? And one of the things that they will talk about is how Sharon Moore deleted his entire 52-message text thread with Stallions, right? Of course, what they don't mention is those files were all recovered, right? So by failing to mention that, it looks like, wow, there's a smoking gun out there that we weren't able to get to. Okay, whatever, right? It's also mentioned that, and I think kind of hilariously is that Connor threw his phone in a pond, right? Now, here's the thing, okay? Everything that's done electronic goes through a server somewhere. If the NCAA had any real power, they could get those records, right? They could at least try to do that. But this goes back to that one of the reasons there was a failure to cooperate is that people decided just to ignore them, to not go to kangaroo court, right? And this is where I do have a little bit of a problem because by Stallions, Harbaugh, and Sharon and Denard, um, quote, failing each to meet the membership's expectations of cooperation, it is creating more of a distraction, right? I get that. And that's part of the thing that I don't like about this, that we're still talking about this years later, right? Um, but again, it's kangaroo court, right? Um, it's with the way the NCAA historically has dealt with things like this. Um, and again, for the millions of dollars they spend investigating, this is all you got. This is all you have, right? And you have, as you said, the opposing fan bases beating the drum, waiting for this huge hammer to drop on Michigan. That was always going to happen any minute, right? Um, this is all you got. This is all you have, and it's frustrating that I think you and I have been um, consistent in this. Is that Michigan was not going to lose their national championship? They were not going to lose games. This is the phrase is a nothing burger, right? Um, the more you know about football, the less you are surprised by this that teams do this to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet you had the media, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing in the world, right? And as you mentioned, one of the things that Stallions has talked about is there is a whole network of folks that he would exchange tapes with who are doing this in other schools, right? Which is, again, just kind of floating out there, right? So it's yeah. So how do you feel about the failure to cooperate charge? How do you feel about the failure to cooperate charge?
I mean, it's the NCAA's frustration about the whole process and not being able to get Michigan red-handed. So they took that emotion within the committee and maximized all of the actual infractions that they could. So failure to cooperate is the responsibility of the head coach in the program. That's the strongest thing that they could do, uh, given the whole context of finding not much to back up the amount of drama that they created, as you just said, right? So to me, this is a lot of big emotions and big anger from the NCAA that they maximized every opportunity that they could justify on paper in the document. And the bylaw says that there's a duty of the head coach and the program to cooperate with these investigations, and obviously Michigan didn't. So it's technically true, and it's over. It's over twerked. It's over torqued, and that's the long and short of it. Again, I think that it does all center around a back and forth with Harbaugh, and there are more actual issues and violations than I'm happy with. I'm still pretty disappointed from a fan of the program standpoint that these problems all existed. But again, for the amount of run that they were trying to get out of it, it's not in balance. And again, the conference, the rival coaches, and then eventually all the rest of the Big Ten coaches and Tony Petitti, the commissioner, they did everything they could in the moment to try to derail Michigan and the season because they knew the NCAA wasn't going to be able to do anything quickly enough. And they bent every possible conference rule and norm that they could to take the actions that they did by suspending Harbaugh. So the fact that the players, again, on the field were able to overcome that, it really is what took the wind out of the sails of this entire thing. and now it's a matter of just going through the motions and tying up loose ends. That's what it feels like to me.
And speaking of the Big Ten, I went back. Jim has been not shy in criticizing the Big Ten. Okay. And here's him talking about what the conference should have done back in 2017 about facilities.
It's become apparent after going around to all the visiting schools in the last couple of years that a conscious effort of gamesmanship that is unsportsmanlike. When you have locker rooms that are too small, they're not heated or cooled properly. In this case, there's no air conditioning. Such a tight, cramped environment. You have to open the doors to get some kind of ventilation going in a very small area. People walking by, they're watching you dress. Number of urinals or bathrooms for the players, staff. I think there was 2. There's not even a private door around it, and then mainly the health and safety of the players. Very, very small space for a training room that had nothing in it. This is no different than the facility I think I saw when I was there in 1986. And I'm not putting this on Purdue. This is league-wide. It needs to be addressed by the league. It needs to be addressed by the commissioner. And we're going to lead the way. We're going to look at what we have, but there needs to be a way to X-ray a player at the stadium. There has to be a minimum standard of care for the players. Again, we put a lot of emphasis into health and safety of the players, but it doesn't even seem sanitary. You were all in there. We've already talked about the heat, and it seems to be a conscious effort to gamesmanship, get an advantage over the opponent. And I wish I'd have taken a picture of the actual table that is given to the visitors to put the players on when they're injured. I mean, it looks like it's from the 20s. It was ripped. It's just not good. And I think that's a pattern in the Big Ten. I asked Don Brown, did you see the same thing in the ACC? Not to this extent. Did not see it to this extent in the Pac-12 when we coached there. And you could keep going on. Injured players that can't get an X-ray. Taken to a student health center in a van. We needed a brace for a player, and there wasn't one at the facility we were taken to. There was a lot of things that needs to be addressed, and talked to Ward about it. And I would ask that the rest of the Big Ten coaches look into this as well, and make this a priority, because we're talking about all of our players here, and we'll start first with us, and make sure that you have guests, you have visitors that are coming in that their health and safety needs are being addressed.
Did you put the starters on a bus before that game, an air-conditioned bus?
I said they had the option to go in there, because as I said, it was so cramped, it was so hot, it was like a hot box, and really the only way to get relief was to open the doors. Again, you have people watching you dress. It's not good, and I've seen this at other facilities in the Big Ten. It needs to be addressed by the commissioner, and I would hope that they would look into it immediately.
So here you have the conference really not protecting Michigan, and the NCAA gunning for them. And I feel like that as a Michigan fan, I understand Harbaugh's frustration with the NCAA. I understand his frustration with the Big Ten. But there's also a point of, again, when you jump up in the crosshairs, don't be surprised if people pull the trigger, and that 23 team was able to overcome all that makes it an even better story. I mean, really makes the undefeated season um, even sweeter for us fans. So, and you know, I like what you mentioned. It's the NCAA having big emotions, right? Um, the panel stated, in short, Stallion's multiple and repeated failures to cooperate are some of the worst the committee has ever seen. And you know, I guess you haven't seen much. So, next section, impermissible recruiting, right? So, one of the concerns that Harbaugh's lawyer mentioned, um, in him not wanting to turn over phones and things, was that they wanted to do a fishing expedition, right? Well, here's one of the things they found in the fishing expedition, right? Um, they found impermissible recruiting, right, to 4 prospects in the spring and summer of 23. Now, Clint, you and I know, and everyone should know, that college football programs recruit hundreds of athletes. Okay, I mean it's a constant battle to bring recruits in, and it's one of the things that coaches mention. The constant grind is one of the reasons that many mention that they want to go pro. Right? Is that you don't have the recruiting grind. So basically, that after doing a wide, far-ranging investigation, they found things about 4 whole prospects. That's stunning. I'm shocked, and please read all the sarcasm that I intend with that.
Yeah, the fishing expedition part of it is really, again, the emotion of the NCAA, the back and forth in the media, Connor Stallions and his documentary taking shots at the NCAA, Harbaugh in the media taking shots at the NCAA, right? The tit for tat is what this is. So they got in there and found everything that they could, and are trying to maximize the total amount and weight of the sanctions that they're putting on the Michigan. So are these problems? Are they technically against the rules? Yes. Should there be, some type of consequences for when you break the rules? Yes. But again, this particular section feels like an add-on because they feel like they could not um, bring down the hammer that they wanted to bring down. So they found as many feathers as they could drop on our heads as possible. And this is another thing. So uh, again, as a Michigan fan, I wish that there weren't recruiting violations and impermissible recruiting practices that were going on. Certainly with the folks that were involved. Um, you know, Denard Robinson being right at the center of this also is a negative. I love Denard. We have loved Denard since his playing days. And to have just another bit of turmoil here, and even more um, issues, and another barrier to him eventually, hopefully in the future being able to be reintegrated with the program in a positive manner is is a is a bummer. That sucks. But again, in the grand scheme of things, they went looking for anything that they could find, and this is part of the add-on that they threw on top in order to try to give it some more gravitas.
Within the Michigan program, they talk about stacking days, right? You want to have one good day after another. And I looked at this as the NCAA stacking, and just doing everything they could to make it sound worse. And again, Clint, as you said, I'm not happy with it, but around 4, like you went searching and this is all you found. And I want to be clear, okay, I'm not happy about it. But if you go into any, it's interesting. A guy, Andy Anderson, who used to um, do the podcasts with me on umgoblue.com. Okay. He used to be an auditor for the state of Michigan. And he would say, If my boss sent me in somewhere, we're going to find something. He goes, if you don't want to see us, because we will find something, right? Maybe a big thing, it may be a little thing. But if we look through enough things, we will find something, right? And this is kind of what I thought when I saw this is, you know, you're going to find something if you go looking, right? And I'm disappointed they found anything, but as far as the grand scale of life, this is all you found. You went on a fishing expedition and you found this. Okay, great. Um, Now the next section is head coach responsibility, and I feel this is the biggest shot uh, at Harbaugh. Right. Um, the scouting scheme and recruiting violations in the football program demonstrate that Harbaugh violated the principles of head coach responsibility. Harbaugh did not embrace or enforce a culture of compliance during his tenure, and his program had a contentious relationship with Michigan's compliance office, leading coaches and staff to disregard NCAA rules. Show me the receipts. Okay? This looks like a really broad statement that you can say. And to me, this looks like okay, the head coach is responsible for everything no matter what. Okay? And I want to be clear on that. Whether you know about it or not, you're responsible. You're the captain of this ship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that Jim himself would argue with that, right? His lawyer may, but he would. But again, when you look at the top charges, you look through everything, right? And all you found was that Connor spent $35,000 scouting. Stupid, not criminal. Okay. And, I like to use the analogy of I you didn't know what they were going to find, Clint, right? Because again, they went on a fishing expedition. So um, I never believed there were major problems in the program. I thought that the Michigan State and Ohio State people were mentally pleasuring themselves with the possibility of that happening, but that wasn't going to happen, right? But you kind of wait to see. And I look at this, I'm like, this is all you got? Really? And when you look at this, it's like, yeah, 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 and another thing, right? And it's frustrating to me that um, so much time, so much energy went into this, and they're like, well, we didn't find, we weren't able to drop the hammer, but the head coach is responsible for these little things too. And I guess I just, um, you know, to say, hey, there's not a culture of compliance. Well, show me, right? Show me where. And if this is all you found, I don't believe that there's a phrase, facts not in evidence. Okay, I'm not seeing it. It's again, it looks like them having big feelings.
Yeah, I think again this is very much wrapped up in the back and forth with Harbaugh, and this is where they actually have to claim it. This is what they wanted to be section number one, right? They wanted this to be the headline because for them this was the headline that Harbaugh won't play nice, and that's really the thing, right? But the that's not gonna sell the story the way that they wanted um, for maximum impact. So it's down here. I think when we were talking about it originally, and even back before that, with when we would touch on the hamburger gate issues, again, not the type of issues that you want to be talking about with your football program, right? You and I would much rather be talking about X's and O's, offenses and defenses, schemes, coaches, SP plus rankings, that stuff. The legal wrangling and compliance is definitely not what you and I want to be talking about. But I'm pretty sure if we searched back, we said that because of the findings against Harbaugh in the Burgergate case, that when this second thing popped up in 2023, they were going to go after Harbaugh with everything that they could because they were going to try to show that it's a pattern and that it was a systemic problem. And that's what even gave rise, or it kind of enabled some of the fever dreams from the rival fan bases about the hammer dropping and the death penalty, because that's the type of language that was involved when SMU, decades ago, did get the death penalty. It was because of systemic problems and a culture of noncompliance. So this section is where they are trying to write a strongly worded letter that is supposed to look and feel like the hammer that they let everybody really hope for from the rival fan bases. And anybody who was neutral or objective, again, after Michigan still was able to win the title, even the chairman of the NCAA, weeks after the national championship game, said, "Yeah, I think that they're the national champions. I don't think that anybody's going to take that away." So all of the real tangible consequences were wiped off the table years ago, and this is the overly dramatic, strongly worded letter against Harbaugh and his program that they could do. And when he went to the Chargers in that offseason following the 23 season, they knew that they couldn't touch him and do anything of consequence to him personally. So all of this is years worth of revisions and revisions and revisions and investigations to try to maximize the impact that they could have. And when you look at it that way, it's ridiculous to have wasted all that time and effort and resources into something that is very is it doesn't matter. Harbaugh was not coming back to coach in the NCAA, so adding the 10-year show cause on top of the previous 4-year show cause means nothing. You could make it a 736-year show cause. It doesn't matter. He's not coming back. He's coaching in the NFL. So again, this is all show, and that really speaks to what this particular committee on infractions is in the NCAA. It's feckless, and I think people who follow the sport can see right through it, and we end up just kind of shaking our heads at how ridiculous they look a lot of times.
So, next section, failure to monitor. Lastly, the underlying scouting and recruiting violations demonstrate that Michigan failed to monitor its football program. Now, if they had found worse things, this would be where the hammer would drop, right? Failure to monitor, right? And it's interesting because you read this and it's Harbaugh did not talk to the committee. So basically, they're going to make the assumption that he didn't do anything, right? That he didn't play nice. So we're gonna assume the worst, right? Now, again, as you said, he decided to go to the NFL. He's not going to deal with this, right? And they're having really big feelings, right? And again, if there was stake to this sizzle, right? This is where the justification would come, and there isn't, right? It's screaming into the abyss about their irrelevancy, and then we get to the penalties, right? And all throughout this, I've been telling people, well, this is going to basically be a speeding ticket, right? This is practically a parking ticket for a program the size of Michigan, right? And it's interesting because I've talked to a couple people and they're like $20 million, and I'm like, you don't know how much money comes in, right? Uh, Work that out, right? And it's interesting because one of the things that bothers me in this whole thing is so you have the NCAA coming in, right? And dropping this penalty and coming up with all these things, right? And then you read through it and this is all you got, right? I keep coming to it. This is all you got, right? Now I want to be clear. Um, Michigan really needs to be careful. Okay, they're on probation here, 4 years of probation, and honestly, I think that's the most dangerous thing here. Okay, is that just as before, when Harbaugh got in trouble the first time, and as you said, they were gunning for him. They were gunning for him, right? And now they're gunning for Michigan, right? That we got our eye on you, right? And doubly so. So I think when you look through this, um, you know, Jim has the 10-year show cause order, which doesn't mean anything because he's not coming back. And if he hadn't left, it would have been interesting to see the fight for this. And I would have loved to have seen that fight, but that's not going to happen. You have Denard Robinson with a 3-year cause order, which again is unfortunate for Denard with the other things he has going on. Um, you know, the mean one is the 8-year show cause order for Connor, right? For somebody at his stage in his career, that's a brutal penalty. Um, and of course, we have the suspension of, Sharon's going to sit out 2 games this season and a game next season. Oh no, horrible. And then, when you add up all the different things, it looks like it's going to be about a $20 million penalty for Michigan, which is, oh my gosh, we'll have to have a GoFundMe. How will they pay? Um, so again, how do you feel about the various penalties and things that were dropped here?
Yeah, I kind of jumped ahead and said what I said about the Harbaugh show cause. Like I said, it could be a 10,000 year ban. It doesn't matter, right? Like when in that immediate aftermath from the national championship, his questions were, was the university, was the administration, were the regents going to put their full weight behind fighting the NCAA on his behalf? And when he was not satisfied that was going to be a unified fight, that it was going to be him kind of with partial support from the university. I think that was the final blow in his decision about whether to stay or go. And he's probably right to make that decision. So it is what it is for this point. The Connor Stallions being 8 years, that 8 years is really, really significant. I'm shocked that it's not indefinite. I'm shocked that they didn't just ban him and make him the because he's the headline of this whole thing, right? From a media standpoint, from an impact, from keeping this in the news type of a standpoint, the Connor Stallions piece of it, the fact that 9 years from now he may be back in, then guess what? All of this is going to come back up if he ever coaches at the college level again in any way. It's all going to come back up. It's going to be, and who's going to look bad if that happens? Not Connor Stallions. He's going to look like he's, served his punishment and maybe he's reformed in some of his crazier ways. And, but he's still going to have all of the same. He's going to still bring the same value to whatever that program is from an analytics standpoint, from a strategy standpoint. He's going to be who he is. The NCAA is going to look stupid again if he comes back in 9 years. So I think it's crazy that they made it 8 years. So it is significant. I don't want to downplay. 8 years is a lot, but I am really, really surprised that they didn't make that permanent. Denard Robinson, again, I hope that 3 years is less than 8 years. I hope that when that barrier comes down, Michigan can find a way again to reach out to Denard and figure out a way, maybe not as a direct employee of the program this time, given all of the rest of the issues that have been in place. But you're never going to be able to separate the impact that Denard had on Michigan's program, and he is still the greatest case of what if in terms of NIL. If it had existed then, right, he missed out the most, if not the most, certainly one of the most missed opportunities. So I still think that the university owes Denard Robinson a lot, and I hope that they can figure out how to continue repairing that relationship after this all is over. The financial piece of the sanctions, the bottom line number, as you've said, is, it's enough that Michigan will have to move some things around and figure some things out, but it's not going to cripple the program. It's not going to cripple the athletic department. And again, the NCAA kind of shows what they care about in the way that they even imposed the sanctions. It was 10% of the football budget. Again, trying to imply that these sanctions are for the lack of control or the lack of compliance culture. But then there was the forfeiture of revenue sharing for future postseason considerations. So the NCAA words this financial sanction instead of just saying it's going to be, like they know how much money that is. They know the dollar amount that is or could be, right? They could calculate a range. It might be a minimum of this or a maximum of that. And they could have maximized the fine amount and just said that. But they worded it as giving up their postseason revenue sharing because it sounds kind of like a postseason ban. It's like they couldn't actually do a postseason ban. They couldn't get to the hammer again. So they cut out the shape of a hammer from paper and then showed everybody, here's our hammer. It's more ridiculous to make it look this way, in my opinion. If you wanted it to be impactful financially, you could have just made it the fine, made it the sanction, and move on. The fact that you worded it as giving up your revenue sharing from future postseason considerations, that is, again, makes me shake my head at the NCAA. And okay, great. And then finally, I think from a football standpoint, the Sharon Moore suspension, the two that are self-imposed for this season, apparently this implies the NCAA accepted, Michigan's proposal for a 2-game suspension this year. I think they've already announced that it would be game 3 against Central Michigan and game 4 at Nebraska. And then they added a third to be served in the 2026 season. I think it's more impactful than we're giving it credit for. And we'll talk more about this when we actually get to the season preview. But the 2023 Michigan team, again, we talked glowingly about the maturity and mental toughness of that team and those leaders in that locker room. The fact that they were able to get through the Harbaugh suspension from early in the season, from Burgergate, and then the ad hoc on the fly suspension late in the season from the Big Ten, and still stay focused and play well enough to win some tough games, especially on the road, like the Penn State game, is a tremendous feat. And I don't think even as much as you and I talk about it, I don't think externally in the local media and national media, I don't think that team gets enough credit for how well they performed under a ridiculous amount of stress. Well, the 2025 Michigan team isn't that, right? Bryce Underwood is not, from a leadership standpoint, he's not a third-year J.J. McCarthy yet, right? Jordan Marshall is not senior Blake Corum yet, right? There's nobody on that defense in the linebacker crew that is the leader that Michael Barrett was in 2023. it is going to be more impactful, especially the road suspension at Nebraska. The second road trip, first Big Ten road trip. And it sounds like this particular version of the suspension is not going to be game day only. He's not going to be able to be part of football operations during the week. And we'll see how that shakes out, but it's more impactful. It's certainly going to affect how the team operates. And there are already problems there that this is going to exacerbate. So, of all of it, this is the one that I care about the most. And I do think that it's going to have an impact on the season.
Agreed, and we will talk about that more in our regular podcast. To your point, Clint, about the paper cutout hammer, right? So when I was reading this in real time, right? Penalties. Michigan's repeat violator status, blah blah blah, is sufficient grounds for a multi-year postseason ban. Huh? However, oh, okay. However, here's the part where we realize we have no teeth, right? However, the panel determined that a postseason ban would unfairly penalize student athletes for the actions, blah blah blah. We can't do it, right? The amount the lawsuit that Michigan would unleash is more than we want to fight, and we don't have the ammunition, right? Similarly, the NCAA membership has shifted from scholarship limits to roster spots. The NCAA membership has not yet determined whether roster reductions will replace blah, 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 blah. We can't do that either. All right, so here are the penalties. It will result in a multi-million-dollar fine, and you can almost hear the wah, 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 right? It's just, and you definitely read into this, and it may be my Michigan colors shining through, how disappointed they were when they were drafting this, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it was very clear as they were going through this that they were hoping to find that great big hammer that the Ohio State blogosphere has been so zealously anticipating, right? And same with our Michigan State cohorts, right? And it's just not there. It's just not there. So I agree with you. The story of that 2023 team is not fully appreciated definitely not by the national media. And again, this, as much as I believe that there are many in the media that wanted this to be a bigger story, I have a theory that many journalists are all looking for their own personal Watergate, right? Every story is going to be the big one that brings, the president down. And not everything's a Watergate, right? And it doesn't mean that there won't be and there's not. But I feel that in many cases, people go into everything looking for the worst instead of being realistic and being a fair arbiter of the facts. And I think we see that in the national media. We've seen that play out over the last 30 or 40 years. And, now we see, people in the media who work for networks who have a financial incentive for certain stories to be bigger, right? And again, when you put that profit motive in it, it distorts things. So, yeah. All right. Well, Clint, any final words on this?
Yeah, I think there's one additional piece, and we could talk about whether it's kind of another intentional act by the NCAA to try to make problems for Michigan, or who knows, maybe they're not smart enough to do that. Chris Partridge was fired in the middle of the season in 2023 by the athletic department for allegedly directing or hinting to a player to not cooperate. I don't see that in this document at all. And, Chris Partridge made it pretty clear that he felt like he was scapegoated in the moment by the athletic department And this document, this particular piece, for all of the time and money and resources put into this investigation, Chris Partridge is not implicated at all. And I think that's a problem for the athletic department too. I would imagine they're going to be paying the rest of Chris Partridge's contract. And, fortunately, he landed with Mike McDonald in Seattle in the NFL. He's gainfully employed and was able to move forward. He didn't get a long-term black mark on his particular resume, so that's great. But that's going to be more to deal with for the athletic department, and they may have acted too rashly there, or maybe there's something else that we don't know. But that's another piece of this that's going to come back around. And when it's all said and done years from now, I certainly hope that all of that ends up and whatever was wrong is made right. And that's all that I, without knowing, where the truth is, I would just leave it at that. I hope that we get to the right spot in the long term.
For a guy who was so hardcore in the program, who was such a integral part of the spirit of the team, I think the harshest penalty for him was being cast out during that national championship season.
Yeah.
The money hurts, but the professional hit hurts. But for somebody who lived and died with the program to be looking from the outside in, I think is the thing that, how do you compensate somebody for that? And again,
we're going to find out.
Yeah, well, that's just it. We don't know what kind of agreement, happened when he left, but not only did he get cast out, but it was reported that he was cast out and with, do not hire back, right? Like, you're done. And again, we don't know everything, but yeah, it looks like the athletic department is on the hook. And again, with what we know, rightfully so, because at the time, it sounded like they were limiting damage, and he may have been collateral damage that there was no need for. So that's definitely a story that is going to play out over the next year or so, and it'll be interesting to see how it ends up.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the UMGoBlue.com podcast. This is Phil Callahan along with
Clint Derringer.
Go Blue.
Go Blue.
Thank you for listening to the UMGoBlue.com podcast. All rights reserved.